All right, welcome everybody. We are at our second Rams Coffee Talk that we're taking a crack at. Again, kind of our Rams Coffee Talk is an effort for us to communicate to the community, to our staff, to our students, to our parents about some of the goings on at Robert Adams Middle School, but also just some trying to kind of have some understandings of like what we find is important for parents to know and learn. So again, kind of our overarching brand or theme that we have as a school is personal, local, global. And today we're going to spend some time really talking about personal and local, which is we're going to be diving into school safety. So joining us today, we have Jess Beatty, who's our assistant principal. Hi, Jess.
Hi, David.
And we have Brian DeGiorgio, Officer DeGiorgio, who is one of our two school resource officers. Officer.
Thank you, David. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So we are hoping to kind of dig in a little bit about, our school safety, a little bit about, what we do with intruder response, some of our drills, some of the things that we do as a whole. But just to kind of talk a little bit about, our school resource officer um, uh, initiative or what we have in the school district. We have two school resource officers. Officer DeGiorgio is predominantly at the high school. And then we have Officer Woods, who predominantly spends his time at the what I call the Woodland campus, which is Placentino, Miller, and Adams. All the two officers do work together and support each other through the different things that we have. A school resource officer for us, and I'll let Jess and Officer Giorgio kind of chime in, are meant to kind of have a strong relationship with the schools and be that kind of familiar face that is that kind of middle ground between the Holliston police and the schools, and can kind of help work to kind of develop that relationship. So, Officer Giorgio, if I were to kind of like describe or what if you were to talk a little bit about what you see kind of your purpose in schools and what you bring to the schools and your relationship with myself, with the teachers, with the students, what do you see as far as like the value or what you try to bring as a school resource officer?
So typically, the responsibility of the school resource officer is it's prevention.
Hmm.
It's a prevention-based position. Myself and Officer Woods, like Mr. Jordan said, I'm housed at the high school, and Officer Woods is at the Woodland Street campus. Typically, it's just working with the administrators, the school administrators of all the schools, the guidance counselors, the staff, the students, just to develop relationships and make sure that if something were to come up, we try to prevent something uh, bad from happening. It's also a sharing of information. It's a sharing of information between the school and the police. Again, to develop the relationship and prevent something from happening. It's a supportive position, um, within the school. So, we support the school. We have also we have a school safety committee that myself and Officer Woods and Mrs. Beatty work on, and we meet once a month and discuss school safety concerns. Uh,
So to dig in on that, Jess, I don't know if the two of you can talk a little bit about the functions of our school safety. Like one, like start kind of big, like who's the group, and then kind of what, maybe like how it originated, what it does, and a little bit about kind of the functions of the school safety committee.
Yeah, so it's definitely evolved over time. It started about 4 or 5 years ago. I took it over with Officer Giorgio 3 years ago, and it's comprised of each building's assistant principal, the school resource officers, so both Officer Giorgio, Officer Woods, Chief Cassidy from Fire, which is great. And then we try to have as many representatives, teaching representatives from each building, so that there's equal voice in terms of concerns around school safety and things that we need to be aware of. So, there's at least two either teachers or service providers like counselors, nurses, speech and language type people from each building on there. And like Officer DeGiorgio said, we meet once a month. We usually have a set agenda that Officer DeGiorgio and I put together of things we know we want to discuss, but we always leave it open at the end for any, concerns that the committee representatives want to bring forward to us, and we sort of dive into it. Recently this year, we've created our own email address, and we've provided that to all of the Holliston Public Schools staff so that they could email us directly. So those emails go directly to Officer DeGiorgio and I.
Ooh, getting legit.
Right?
They got an email address.
We're really official. We even got labels to put in our emergency binders that every classroom has in every building, which is a great feature that the safety committee put together. So what we've really tried, and you can jump in any time, Brian, is we've really tried to align safety across all four buildings so that as much as possible, given the differences in ages of kids, is that we're doing drills the same way, we're responding to emergency situations the same way, that people know their roles in the building, who's picking up, if an administrator's out of the building, who's stepping in and taking over. And so we've created binders for every classroom, cafeteria, auditorium. Every space in every building has the same binder with their emergency procedures in it, building maps, staff lists, and our email address so that they can reach out.
And I think it's also important to mention that this committee is made up of, like you said, there's different there's staff members, but also administrators from each building. But it's also the staff members that go back to their classrooms and speak to other staff members that they neighbor within that school, so they can also provide. They can get information from those other staff members that aren't necessarily part of the committee and bring that information to the committee. So there's some transparency there, and everybody's somewhat on the same
Yeah, I mean, because
same
just
page.
even kind of what I have noticed, the value of that committee in just providing an organization and a kind of pre-K through 12 process to our buildings. I think the contributions to the safety of the so I would say the district, the Holliston students, is kind of, we can't even kind of measure what that is. I mean, I just think about kind of the binders, the consistency of the drills, the type of drills, and what that looks like, and then being able to reflect and have conversations as a group to kind of discuss what those next steps were. I've been here for 7 years, and it was basically very site-based as far as what we would do, and segmented. And that's not to say that that's just where education was. I mean, there's a lot that we learned following some of the tragedies in Sandy Hook as far as the efforts that we need to take as a suburban community. These aren't unfortunately, a lot of these shootings, a lot of these safety concerns are still coming from affluent communities as well. So I think the work we're doing has been really powerful, and I have noticed for sure.
And I think it's the old traditional way was, the lockdown, hunker down in whatever location that you're at. And now we've gotten away from that, and this is something that we, discuss in the school safety committee, but then bring it back to the individual schools of giving students and staff the options. And we practice, it's an intruder response protocol, which is either evacuate, take action, or hide out. And obviously, those are the three steps that we want our students and staff to do in the case of an emergency. It's grade specific. Obviously, with your K through 5, they're going to have direction maybe from the staff member. But, obviously 6th through maybe 12, those students might be able to make a decision on their own on what to do if encountered by an intruder or someone that doesn't belong in the school.
And you and I, there are three of us. We've talked about this a lot, but I'm going to act like the parent, a parent here. Is why the change? Why why? I mean, back in my day, we did the traditional kind of lockdown procedure, and even as a teacher myself, I was doing the kind of lockdown procedures. Um, there has been this kind of recent change towards a more active approach to that. You know, what are your thoughts around kind of why that's a valuable shift?
Well, I think it's empowering the students and staff to make a decision to protect themselves. I mean, time's an essence. What we've seen in these incidences is that the threat or the intruder, ultimately their goal is to create casualties and hurt. So putting it back on the students and staff to make a decision, a timely decision to get themselves out of danger's way, um, seem to seem to be the right strategy, and also gives police, like I said, time is important. We're coming, we're responding. The days of setting up perimeters are over. We're coming, we're responding to the school or the building or wherever the threat may be, and accessing that that facility and taking out that threat. And in the meantime, you're hoping the people in that building or that school are taking steps to protect themselves. If it's locking the door or barricading or evacuating to the closest business, calling 911, maybe making note of who is in that, making note of who's in the building, and maybe they know who it is so they can communicate that back to the 911 operator. So it's empowering the people within the school to make decisions to protect themselves.
Very good. Yeah, and I found that the training has been very thorough, and we've done like a very kind of very strategic approach that's consistent across the district. The school safety committee. We talked a little bit about the binders that we've done. What are some of the other things that have come out of that safety committee, or some of the adjustments that we've made, both like to our facilities, but also to like our processes that you feel like have come out of the school committee or out of the school safety committee?
Right. So I think a lot of times when we hear school safety committee, we try to think we're thinking more about our drills and our intruder response, and I think what we've done with the committee has gone beyond that, which is great. So we've looked at access to our building and put in the buzzer systems in every building so that any person coming in needs to buzz in through the camera system in the front of the building, and all other exterior doors are locked, which is great. And I think we have worked really hard with our staff and our students in every building to let them know we're not leaving doors open, we're not propping doors, we're talking about not letting people in, and really getting people to use that buzzer system, which is really effective. We've talked a lot about just the exterior pieces of our building and the cameras that we have installed in the outsides of the building have been really great, and I think have set some minds at ease in terms of just having surveillance over the exterior parts of our building. Um, we've done a lot of work around connecting the schools, the fire department, and the police department to work as a cohesive unit. And we've done each year we do a lot of training. They're called tabletop trainings that are run by Chief Cassidy, and that pulls together all administration from every building. It pulls together all police, including chief of police and all officers, and the fire department. And we go through emergency scenarios, whether that be that they're specific just within our school, or something that's going on in the community that would cause the schools to need to respond in terms of locking the building down. So I think it just shows the steps we've taken as a district to align ourselves with fire and police and become a team. Think about overall safety, not only for students and staff, but just in the community. And I think it's important for parents and family to hear that that's ongoing work that we are constantly doing. We're mindful of it without putting panic in. I think when we talk about school safety, it evokes this fear, and that's not what we want to do. We want people to know that we're ready, we're prepared, and that can be for anything. It can be weather related, terrible storms, and we're ready for that. Loss of power, intruders. So there's constantly things that we're talking about as a safety committee and working on together as a town community, that's preparing us to keep things going in the right direction here. Beyond that, in the safety committee, we look at, pick up and drop off routines and how safe are those, the parking lot, making sure that people are dropping off in the right areas so we don't have students running through parking lots and staff members, at risk. Looking at bus evacuations and how smooth those are going, and just overall, other safety. I don't know, Brian, if you can think of other things we've talked about, but
I think it's also, obviously going, you said bus evacuations. It's, I meet with all the the bus drivers, once or twice a year, and hear their concerns that they might be seeing out on the street or during their routes. Um, Also, some of the things that also district wide is the schools had equipped themselves with radios, so if needed they obviously can communicate amongst each other, but also have the ability, if needed, to communicate to police and fire, and that's been recently added within the last 3 or 4 years. And also, having an additional school resource officer, Officer Woods. I mean, that, you know, to provide a second school resource officer in a district of, I think we have maybe 3,400 kids district wide, if that's how, I mean, that's having another full-time police officer assigned to my school is
it's
huge.
huge.
It really is, and it's just an incredible asset for the schools. Um,
No, yeah, it's been fantastic. I mean, just the radios alone, just coming out of that have become kind of a very very much a part of how we communicate as a middle school, um, in emergencies, but also just in kind of our efficiency through what I call like low level, not non-emergencies, but just essential kind of communication that we need to kind of move quickly through. So it's been nice, and even as you said, the having two school resource officers, we have a person in uniform in our buildings on a regular basis, building relationships with kids, not only just kind of demystifying, police officers and just kind of making them a part of, the everyday part of the middle school, shaking hands, kissing babies, kind of thing. But somebody being able to be in the lunchroom, connect with some of our students, give a couple high fives, pop into a classroom. Um,
And I think it's also important to mention. So in those high fives and kissing babies, and a great way to put it. But there's conversations
Yeah.
that occur between that officer and that student, and a lot of times with staff.
Yep.
You know, and there are things that come out of those conversations that at the end of the day, maybe we prevented something. Maybe something gets back to us. Maybe we're out there to provide support or, maybe provide resources to that family. And that's what the job's all about, and just getting in there and preventing something from happening and developing those relationships. There's so many things that come out of those relationships.
well, also, I mean, unfortunately or sadly, very traumatic things happen out in the community, and that police officers need to respond to. And oftentimes, especially in a community like Holliston, which is predominantly a family-based community, an officer or responds to a situation, and there might be kids in that space, and just being able to, in this highly traumatic situation, have a familiar face, a police officer who can walk right into the situation, and just the comfort that's there for a child, a school age child, to know that somebody they trust, that trusts them, that they have a relationship there, is kind of able to kind of walk them through this highly traumatic event for them. That alone for me does it. To think about some of the things that some of our kids have gone through and know that our school resource officers have been able to be there in some of those situations to kind of help our kids.
And the other piece that comes out of that interaction with the police officer, say at that call, is that if needed, that information that's going on outside of the school, out in the community, can be brought back
Right,
to the
which
school
is
to
helpful.
support that family.
Yep.
And, if it's getting Holston Youth and Family involved, if it's getting, we have a clinician that works with the police department, getting her involved. So there's other resources that are available based on the relationships that the police and the schools have, um, which has been successful. You know.
Well, good. All right. So that is our second Rams Coffee Talk. Officer DeGiorgio, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. Mrs. Beatty, I will thank you too, although you're going to be joining me for many of these in the future. So,
Absolutely.
but thanks everybody. We are kind of a podcast that is on all the podcast different mechanisms for following. So do subscribe to us. Do kind of spread the message. We are willing to take requests of things that you want us to kind of talk about and you want to learn about within an educational setting. But again, Officer Giorgio, thank you very much for
Thank
joining
you
us.
very much for
All
having
right,
me.
Thank
have a
you.
good day.